It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
No fear, no fear, no fear, no fear here, and declare your independence with me, Ernest Hancock, here in Phoenix, Arizona, from the beautiful studios of Freedoms with an S, freedomsphoenix.com. I have a special guest for you today. I wanted to make sure that we got to talk about the GOP debate recently. It was really emphasized that Osama's caught, man. Now what? Is it time to go home? Is it time to leave? Well, Robert Naiman thinks so. JustForeignPolicy.org. JustForeignPolicy.org. He's policy director, and he just wrote an article I read. The war is over. Kiss a nurse and start packing, man. Let's go. Is that your advocacy there, Robert? Is that what you're claiming?
Absolutely.
Well, tell me about your organization. JustForeignPolicy.org. Go ahead and give me a commercial, man.
We're a non-for-profit advocacy organization working to involve more Americans in reforming U.S. foreign policy so that it reflects the values and interests of the majority rather than the narrow elites in Washington that have dominated it for decades. And in particular, trying to move the U.S. away from these expensive and bloody wars and foreign intervention and towards respect for international law, cooperation, and diplomacy, which is a lot cheaper for our country, both in terms of blood and treasure.
Hey, Robert, are you on speaker or got on speaker?
No, I'm speaking to you on my cell phone.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we get the best connection. Sound a little bit like on speaker. Now, Robert, I can understand your advocacy of, hey, let's talk about just foreign policy. Let me go ahead and get an idea what your foreign policy would be in regard to Afghanistan. Now, let's focus on Afghanistan for a moment here, because that's what Osama was most linked to. When did you start advocating, and what were you advocating?
Well, we have been advocating for some time that the president should establish a real timetable for military withdrawal from Afghanistan. It doesn't mean leaving tomorrow. It means establishing a clear path that has an endpoint where U.S. troops are not in Afghanistan. That's number one. And number two, President Obama has already promised that he would begin withdrawing troops this summer, and we've advocated that should be a significant and substantial withdrawal, not a token kind of fake withdrawal like the Pentagon is advocating.
I remember him running for president. He was advocating getting out a heck of a lot sooner than this.
Well, actually, when he was running for president, President Obama was advocating for going in. Many people didn't notice that so much at the time because much of the debate was about Iraq. And with respect to Iraq, President Obama, then Senator Obama, was advocating getting out. But with respect to Afghanistan and Pakistan, he was advocating getting in. Unfortunately, at that time, we didn't have a really full debate, in part because, the main kind of top-line candidates were all saying variations of the same thing. And, of course, it hadn't become as controversial an issue because during the Bush administration, Afghanistan was the second war. All the overwhelming majority of the resources, the troops, the money was happening in Afghanistan. So the majority of soldiers are being killed in Afghanistan. So that's where people's attention was. Now that Obama is president and has escalated twice in Afghanistan, there were essentially 30,000 troops January 2009, when President Obama took office, there's now 100,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. So, of course, people have started to pay attention to this more as the scale of U.S. involvement has more than tripled. The cost has shot up. The number of soldiers being killed, there's now more U.S. soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan under President Obama than were killed there in all the years under President Bush. So, of course, people are more focused on this now and are seeing, the same dynamics that we saw over and over again in Iraq, with the military leaders saying, give us more time, give us more troops, we're making progress, we're about to turn a corner. And yet the independent analysts look at it and they say, we don't see any progress here. We just see more killing and more wasted money. And at the end of the day, what's most spectacular about this is that even the Obama administration, even military leaders say at the end of the day, we cannot and will not militarily defeat the Afghan Taliban, domestic, indigenous Afghan Taliban insurgency in Afghanistan. At the end of the day, this is going to end in some kind of negotiated political settlement. So the choice that we're making right now is a choice to continue the war in the hopes that somehow the eventual political negotiated settlement, everybody concedes that's the end game, that will be so much better for us than the deal we could get by going straight to negotiation, that justifies all the blood and treasure that we're continuing to spend there. And of course, that nobody has even bothered to try and explain how these two outcomes will be so different as to justify this expenditure. But part of the story surely is that the Pentagon, people in the Pentagon, want to maintain a permanent military garrison in Afghanistan. They want to keep
who's in charge. See,
this
is when you say
military bases.
Fortunately, I have that thing called the internet, okay? And it has here, I got the New York Times. This is December 3rd, 2008, right after the election. And it's talking about, Senator Barack Obama offered a pledge that electrified and motivated his liberal base, vowing to end the war in Iraq and so on. And then he becomes president and so on, and goes through the, the same kind of stuff. And then he talks about how he's going to come out, and there's always was a tension, if not a bit of contradiction, in the two parts of Mr. Obama's campaign platform to end the war by withdrawing all combat troops by May 2010. Well, it's past May 2010. So no matter what he says, as a peace-loving, I don't want to go in, I shouldn't have been there anyway, want to end the war kind of guy here, why would I believe anything that he says? And then I look at who's really in charge here. As you're doing your advocacy for peace, for drawing down, for ending, give me a timetable, who is it you think that you have to convince? Is it Obama? Is it the Pentagon? Is it the military industrial we rule you empire of? I mean, who is it that you think you really have to make the case to?
Well, I think it's multiple audiences, because there is a split in Washington. There's a split inside the Obama administration. The one faction, the Pentagon faction, wants to stop any significant withdrawal of troops, wants to stop any effort to put a real end date on this military intervention. Another faction of the Obama administration, more the civilian political people, is saying, this just isn't worth it. It's not worth it to America. In terms
they didn't know that before?
Blood and treasure.
Heck, that's what he was campaigning on.
Well, there was this split is longstanding, and goes back to the first demands from Petraeus and McChrystal and others for military escalation. You had, even then, people in the White House like Vice President Biden, Rahm Emanuel, very skeptical of the Pentagon's demands for more troops, for military escalation, very skeptical of the claims being made of how this is going to fundamentally.
All right. Well, when we come back after the break, I'm on you about wanting to make sure that we can have some kind of an understanding of what it is that would make the anti-war movement, wherever the heck it went, happy. And I know it would be like, let's see, no war. How about that? Is it not, a little war, kind of, glossed over war, without U.S. troops there war, just mercenary war, some kind of a different kind of a war? How about none? We'll see about it when we come back.